Hi, I'm Patrick Sullivan. This is Recurring Insight, and for this episode, I'm going to be talking about mutagenic growth. At a top level, I think Phyrexian Mana has two pretty significant problems, and I expect that they are related. One is, players just do not appreciate how powerful it is to exchange life for other advantage relative to how powerful it is in Magic. And you can go all the way back to the origins of the game. Fast Bond was not properly appreciated for a very long time, and believe it or not, InQuest magazine rated Necropotence the worst card in Ice Age when that set got previewed. In many of the same ways that players overrate gaining life, they underappreciate how powerful it is to pay life in exchange for other things, and that makes it a dubious place to try to mine design space, because you have to make the cards more powerful in relation to how good you should be making them, given how much that negative reaction is baked in. And then the second problem, and probably related to the first, is that the cards with Phyrexian Mana are just way too powerful on average. Way overrepresented in tournament Magic relative to how many cards have the keyword, and cards like Dismember, Mental Misstep, Gutshot, Mutagenic Growth have shown that they can show up in low power formats and also scale up very nicely into high power formats. So that's the problem with the mechanic at the top level. Drilling in specifically to Mutagenic Growth, I think it's emblematic of where the design team sort of indulged the worst characteristics of it. I don't think the mechanic is necessarily a problem on its own, as in I think you can do a good execution. And Molten Steel Dragon is the type of design that I would point to as being kind of the good way to do it. Even though it's not particularly powerful, I think even if it was more powerful, it could still be a good way of doing Phyrexian Mana. Couple things going on here. One, it's not free. You still need to have some mana to put it onto the battlefield. Two, it gets played on the main phase. So it's not a trick necessarily, even if it's unexpected. It just enters the battlefield. It doesn't even have haste or do anything when it enters the battlefield. And so the fact that it's, being cast at a mana cost that's super discounted, the fact that your non-red opponent could potentially have it, isn't really an issue with how the card plays out. And then lastly, there are some really powerful incentives to play with red mana in your deck, even though it's not a requirement. That's all really good stuff, and the exact opposite of true is in all cases with Mutagenic Growth. For one, it is purely off-color. And in fact, because the value over replacement is so high for colors that don't get pump spells, it's often more powerful for non-green people to be playing with than green people. Another problem is just the rate. I think that Mutagenic Growth would be potentially a problematic design, even if the Phyrexian Mana cost required you to control a forest. The way that it went out the door obviously is significantly more powerful than that, and like I just mentioned, shows up all the time in non-green decks. There's a pretty intense color pie bleed for other colors to be able to get pump spells this good at this rate. And then lastly, there's just the play pattern issue. It's really nice in Magic when people have shields down moments. The stress of the game can kind of go up and down, and it's not necessarily bad to have some moments that are more stressful than others, but it's nice if the game kind of toggles back and forth. One of the moments that alleviates stress is one player taps out, and then the other player doesn't really have to think about the responses that someone can have. It's really infrequent, and usually a function of high power formats for people to have responses. Mutagenic Growth is very stressful all the time. There's no shields down moment because it can be enabled for 0 mana. Furthermore, unlike cards like Gutshot or even Mental Misstep, the permutations of what can happen when someone has Mutagenic Growth is often very vast, and it can respond to a lot of different cards or combat sequences that you can have. A lot of the other powerful 0 mana Phyrexian Mana designs don't really work that way. Gutshot's usually pretty limited in the permutations of it. Mental Misstep is very defined in terms of what it can interact with. And so the stress of Mutagenic Growth is on top of the player for the entire game. I am suspicious of Phyrexian Mana kind of at a starting point because of the paying life for doing things issue not being properly respected. But even if you wanted to do it, I think there are executions that are better. the stuff that is creatures, the stuff that gets played on main phases, the stuff that requires mana, all move the needle a little bit, I think, towards the mechanic being a better one. But Mutagenic Growth is emblematic of indulging some of the worst elements of the keyword at a baseline. Again, that was Mutagenic Growth, and this is Recurring Insight. Make sure that you're subscribed to the Star City Games YouTube page so you can get notified when new content gets uploaded to the page, and keep the requests coming. I got the next wave sort of queued up here, and they're going to involve a lot of frequent requests from the comments page. So if there's a card you want me to go over, just be persistent. It takes a little bit of time, but with enough time I'll get to it.